I am in Alpharetta, Georgia, and I am meeting with Tess Sharp today. And many of you may not know Tess. I met Tess recently when we were at a meeting back in Thomasville. So I always say that I try to do interviews where people have some kind of connection to Thomasville or have some kind of connection to the Red Hills region of Southwest Georgia. And Tess, I'm going to just say that your connection is me, right?
Yes.
And it's been so fun getting to know you over these past few weeks. We've had some great phone conversations, and I just thought that you had such an intriguing, interesting story. This podcast is all about just people being transparent, just sharing their stories and how God has revealed himself to them in their story. In talking with you, I've learned that I think you've lived a lot of places, and as you said, you're not even part of a military family.
Oh, yes, that's true. It was part of a kind of a gypsy heart, I suppose. Yes, I think God was just putting me through all the valleys and the hills just to give me that bit of experience that I think that I needed later in life because I felt sheltered.
You currently live in Georgia, but you haven't been back in Georgia for too long. Am I correct on that?
Oh, that's true. I'm back in Georgia after being gone for about 33 years. I landed here under unusual circumstances, and I came back under very traditional circumstances.
Now, one thing that I like to do on this podcast is I'll just ask people a random question because it's kind of funny. You know, you and I have been talking a lot, too, about the word isolation.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think it's so important for us, as you said so eloquently last night, as we ate at that wonderful restaurant, by the way. I need to give a plug for Citizen Soul. Am I saying that right?
Yes, Citizen Soul.
In Alpharetta.
Downtown Alpharetta.
That was so good. One thing you and I have in common, too, is we like food.
Oh, yes.
We like food. We like drink.
Yes.
So we just had a great time. But one of the things that I think is so good about being together again is just having that face-to-face contact. And I think it really gives you an opportunity to get to know somebody else's heart. So to keep things light, to go back to this random question.
Okay.
It's a rainy afternoon on a Sunday. You want to watch a movie. What movie do you think you would be drawn to watch? Would it be something like The Notebook, or are you going to watch something funny like Old School? What would Tess watch on a rainy Sunday afternoon?
I am an old movie fan, so it probably would be a Cary Grant, a Joan Crawford. You can go down the line. Let's say Debbie Reynolds, maybe Singing in the Rain with Debbie Reynolds, Gene Kelly. But I really love those old black and whites from the 30s up to probably about early 60s. I like those. Then again, I don't know, I might watch Fight Club with my husband. Which I love the weirdness and the different levels of like reveal that goes on in this poor fragmented man's mind. And because it has a spiritual content too, it was like he finds out the person he's been fighting, the enemy itself, was right inside of him the entire time.
Wait a minute, I've never watched Fight Club.
Oh, you better pull on your jeans and go.
But do you know how happy my husband would be if I watched something called Fight Club with him? He would love it.
Yes, and you really have to kind of hang with it because it dots back and forth, and then all of a sudden it just comes full circle. Which I just gave you a spoiler. I am so
It's
sorry.
okay. It's okay. With my memory the way it is,
You'll forget.
I'll never remember. Okay, so going back to old movies, I do have a question for you. One of my favorite old movies is Imitation of Life.
Oh my gosh, Lana Turner. Wait, I will hang on to that. She was a great actress.
She had an incredibly interesting story too.
No, the lady that played her maid, such a prominent part of it. And my mother and I used to watch that when I was growing up. We would pop popcorn, throw ourselves on the couch. We had seen it 5 times, and we still would cry.
Me too.
Every time the funeral scene came. Yeah, it was just wrenching, absolutely wrenching. We won't tell the plot, so people will go out there and watch it.
That's right. That's definitely a classic. Let's talk a little bit more about your story, because I know you've had, as you said, you've had that gypsy heart and just had a very interesting life. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I think part of the story I have to talk about I guess just being a teenager. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee to Baptist parents. That was my situation, and my mother liked to call it a rebellious spirit. I like to think of it as being a teenager and a seeking heart. But grew up in Memphis, Tennessee with a very conservative family. A Methodist grandmother that used to sit on her front porch and examine all the kids that walked by, and she would tell them their skirt was too short and send them back home to their mother. I loved her. She such quirkiness. So I think that's where I get mine. And also, divorced parents, other things that just to me that made my life hard. Now looking back at what's going on today, I'm like, wow, was I self-centered?
Yeah.
So, but
how old were you when they divorced?
6 or 7.
Oh, you were young then.
Yeah, 8 maybe, because my brother was 4 and I'm 4 years older than he is. She married, she married a very nice man. I love my stepfather so much. Miss him. He's been gone for a while. Getting back to the rebellious heart, I remember at 16 years old, I was already, because of biological father issues, talked about
we
that.
did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because, the thing of it is, and it still makes me verklempt, is you kind of, the worst wound is your first heartbreak. And with girls with issues, their first heartbreak, their father was the first one that broke their heart. And I carried that very heavy. He's got some issues that, he has to deal with, but he grew up in an abusive home. And parents just pass that on.
Mm-hmm.
Hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
I think the saying is going. But anyway, so I launched into the women's movement pretty quick. I mean, at 16 years old, all these, and you didn't realize it at that age, but all these little boys that are crushing on you, and they look at you like, with these eyes, like that man's heart will do, which unfortunately I didn't find out really what that was till later on in life. But I was like, no, don't open my door. I can open my own door, and don't do this, and don't. I started firmly rooting myself in that women's liberation early.
And do you think when you talk about having the broken heart from your father, would it be abandonment?
Yes, it was abandonment and restraining from affection, a lot of accusations that I had nothing to do with. Because I have to be very careful how I phrase this. I grew up with hearing my father calling women whores, sluts, and the B word. Mm-hmm. And he would be shouting to the wind, or, to some person, or having a conversation. And I listened to this much because that's what they equated to. They were slobs, or, it was a constant barrage of very, very negative, which my grandmother was a very gentle spirit, and she was very dedicated and loyal, and I can only surmise that he got that from my grandfather, which, his father, which was a very cruel person. But anyway, that goes back to the sins of the father. You gotta heal yourself. You shouldn't be raising children with that toxic, pain of, but unfortunately, it was passed on. Because of that, my first response was to try to find a place of strength, because my mother did not know what to do with that. She didn't know what to say, because I was a very independent kind of person. And creative. Brother and I, growing up, we used to catch frogs and snakes and charge people to come in the backyard to look at them like a zoo. So,
did people actually pay you?
Yes, we did, because we put on little plays in the garage too. So we were like reptile theater or something. I don't know. That was kind of part of our independent spirit. Going, pulling us back to early women's NOW movement when I went to college. Oh my gosh, I could join NOW. And I went into college at 17, but turned 18 soon after that. Moved out, got a part-time job. So I was pretty outside the home at a early, still, and you think, oh, I'm so big, I've been through so much, because there was a lot of things that I experienced in my younger years, but thinking I was so independent and could handle it. And I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, my brain was still developing, and I moved out. Because what they say that you really don't fully develop till 21 years old.
More so, I would say women. I think it takes longer for men to develop than it does women. And I can remember being that age thinking I knew it all.
Oh, yes.
And I thought, I'm mature.
Yes, I got it going on. Got going to college, got my job, got my apartment, and hanging around, getting to be NOW, and taking empowerment study, which I didn't realize that that's what they were at the time, but they were.
So you think more of, could I use the word indoctrination at that time?
I was thinking about that driving here today. I was thinking about in high school gleaning on to those thoughts, and I was like, they say that they're indoctrinating our children now, but this has been going on for a long time. It was just a softer whisper, just a little bit of, and knowing the psychology, I think Rhonda Thomas, which you'll be having on in another time, is so well the way she explains about the indoctrination through just personal experience. And I think that's what they were doing. I think women's liberation, although I think it was necessary at one point to make sure that women, because weren't required to wear dresses when they're pregnant. There were points in which needed to be brought, but instead of leaving it right there, they went further to where they were making women feel bad about, now being a mother, being a homemaker job. There's so much, and I thought women's movement was about supporting women. At that time that we still had some glass ceilings to go through. I guess I have to date myself, because this is this is 1974. It was an indoctrination there, and they were tapping into, they take a little bit of truth and they start twisting it to where you won't even recognize what it is later on. I'm in NOW and in college, and just my little protest signs, and this is the way things are supposed to be, and independent. Then unfortunately I questioned why I ended up marrying, being as independent as I was, ended up marrying a very narcissistic alcoholic person. I think because, especially in narcissistic relationships, they say all the things that you want to say, that you want to hear, and they provide that strength. Because I didn't even realize I was looking for a man with strength, a man that was protective, and that's the way I felt, which is kind of weird, I suppose, for a women's liberation advocate to turn around and marry someone of that mental thread. And that didn't end up well.
It's almost like you wanted to find a place where you were important and where you belonged. And so you found that in the women's organization, which you were probably thinking, I'm asserting my, like you said, I'm asserting my independence. I'm, showing that I'm a strong woman. And then yet there must have been that broken piece of you that needed.
That hurt little girl was still wanting to be protected. And
I do think that people who have narcissistic tendencies, or even to the point that have a narcissistic personality disorder, pick up on that in people.
Yes. Then I believe by this time I think a life had broken me down, because I was molested by my uncle when I was a child. Referring back to what I said I went through, I truly believe is that once that spirit is put on you, because it's your fault it's happened to you, it's you have to take responsibility. I don't care if it feels bad, you really wanted it. There's a multitude of brain termites that go with going through that experience.
That's a good way of putting it, because obviously that was not your fault. But you had to probably reach a point where you realized, no, that was not my fault. That was an adult, an older adult who had authority over me, who knew better. But to a child, you were probably still at that place as a child, and then as an adult, you've got to grapple with all these emotions and feelings that go along with having had that.
Yes, because, before it had happened, I had looked to my uncle to be a safe place. And then that just blows you out of the water.
Right.
About your whole perspective about being in protection. I think it was right before I got married, I guess, and I think a lot of people that were molested when they were kids have a coming out of the closet moment to where they can't contain it anymore, and they tell their family.
Mm-hmm.
And when I told my father's family, I got blamed. It was because I was coming on to him. I mean, this is still like a battle that goes on, I guess, with them or not. I haven't talked to a lot of them in so long because I got tired of it being asked, well, what happened? Why should I have to give you details? You want to know details so you can sit here and judge whether it was or not. And you want to put me through that anguish again. And I just finally got so exhausted, I just didn't want to talk to him anymore. Yeah. So, he apparently couldn't stop talking about it because, I hate to say it, but I know the day he died, I really felt the weight being lifted. Weird to say, and it's not, and I'm like, wow, that's not a Christian heart, because you're not supposed to really want somebody to, leave this earth without being saved. Heck, I don't know. I mean, he might have been. I could feel a weight.
And he never apologized?
Oh, no. Apparently I was the one that seduced him. I'm 9 years old. So,
no. Yeah.
But
I'm sure that death, because I know people who've been through that same thing. I can remember, it even, happened in a close circle around me, and I can remember when those people would come around and that child would see them. They just shudder.
Oh, yeah, you just...
And so you've always got that as long as that person is around. Anytime you would encounter them, until you get to a point where you can say, you know what, you...
Go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember people would say, well, get in the car with Uncle so-and-so and go to grandmother's. And I'm like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And I would, get in trouble for being obstinate. And why? I just... for the life of me, I'm like, why didn't I just say something? But then you're told, this is your fault. You're told nobody will believe you. The same old sad story that so many people, and you think you're the only ones, the only one that this happens to. Goes back to that isolation thinking about. You're isolated in your pain and your shame, confusion. I hate to visit this time in my life because it does, mess up your train of thought.
But thank you for sharing that, because unfortunately, when you look at, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm using a child as a statistic, I'm not, but there are so many people who are sexually abused.
Yes.
They're going to hear what you're saying, and it's going to encourage them. And I know that took a lot to tell me that, so thank you for doing that.
Do you know, if it does help somebody, then God give me a voice to speak even
That's right.
further. But you're going to have to talk about it. I'm much better than I used to be. You're going to have to talk about it to get through it, because a lot of times you bring it up and people go, can't you just get over it? That happened a long time. And I quit talking about it for a while, because that's what would be their response. The knife felt being even further, put in about the betrayal and so forth and so forth. There's also good things on the other side of coming out, because that was It was 51 years ago. And it does plague you. And it's like, because of those things that happened, I joined NOW. And then I, married somebody. In fact, my father came to me after we were divorced and said, why did you go out and find somebody just like me to marry? I was like, what?
So your dad could see that too?
Yes. Apparently everybody else saw it but me.
How long were y'all married?
I think about 4 years. He was physically abusive. And mentally abusive. I think my marriage ended when I looked at him and I just said, drunks don't make good lovers. Or maybe it was the time that after he beat me one night, the next morning I got the skillet my grandmother gave me, and I said, if you hit me again, I will bludgeon you in your sleep and nobody will blame me. I know people are like, oh, that's a horrible thing to say. You don't know till you're in that position.
That's right.
He was 6'2".
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
5'2". He outweighed me by 80 pounds, and you get so angry and so fed up.
Thank God, though, that you had the wisdom to get out of that.
Oh no, he still left me. Don't ask
But
me
I mean,
to clarify or even
it's
understand
okay.
that.
But you see so many people getting caught in that cycle
Mm-hmm.
where someone who has that kind of personality, they know how to manipulate you, they know how to control you, they know how to mess with your mind. People get to the point where they start thinking that what they're living in is normal. And before you know it, somebody's been married to an emotionally, physically narcissistic person for 30 years.
It's a slow conditioning. It's like the frog in the pot of water.
Oh, mm-hmm.
It's that thing, because it had gotten to where I was going to work and going to school. I was going to the University of Colorado at Boulder. It's that boiled water thing. It's well, you need to pay half the bills. Well, I've got a part-time job and I'm going to school. I didn't take you, and it just like that,
Bringing you down.
Yeah,
Not building you up.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to back referral to my father. Women are just there to live off men. Women don't. They're blah 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 blah.
On.
Yeah, because I do want to let people know. They were like, oh gosh, Tess Sharper, life's so sad. No, believe me, there's great joy when you come through all these things. You just have to be stubborn and persevere. Divorce, because I have to tell the story of I'm married now. I've been married a little over 2 years. It's fabulous, and it happens to be to a man that I met right after my divorce. Unfortunately, both of us didn't have the relationship we have with God now, or each other. It was a different kind of situation. But anyway, so I get divorced, and I decided I need to go back home to regroup, because that was anybody coming in out of a narcissistic, abusive relationship, kind of need time to heal. So I went home.
And thank you for saying that, because I've seen people too who've rebounded. But the healing
I can't
is
say enough about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, when this next season of my life will be a lesson in that, because I moved back home, and it wasn't long after I moved back home that I was with friends of mine, and we were, and don't hold this against me. It's not the same. This is in the 80s. We met at a local restaurant at a happy hour, and I met this guy that just walked over to the table and just started talking. We'd invited him or something. We sat down and started talking, and next thing we know, it's 3 hours later, and our friends had left us. Everybody that we came there with had left us. We looked up for a minute and was like, oh, okay, well, they're gone. We went back down. We talked 6 o'clock till 10, just nonstop. And he was in town in Memphis. He was in Memphis from Atlanta at the time, and he was in town for business. He'd stayed there he had just gotten there. So from that night on, we saw each other every night when he got off of work. And then at the end of that week, he called in and took a vacation week. So he stayed another week. It was just a connection. We weren't talking about things. We were still getting to know each other. We really hadn't become friends. But there was that, the first time he kissed me, it was like, wow. So at the end of 2 weeks, he's going back to Atlanta. I am, I'm going to miss him. He gives me an airline ticket. And he goes, whenever you want to come to Atlanta, just let me know. And he said, but I really want you to move back with me. I want you to come and us and live together. And I'm like, well, I just got out of a divorce. So, I hadn't been divorced even a year. And there was still a lot of seething because of the abuse. But there was still that hopeful heart, that was there. That, like, everybody still believed there's love there. There's, something different. But you got to get through the healing to get to the real love.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, little sidebar, I thought it was so funny. He leaves to go back to Atlanta, and I go shopping with some girlfriends of mine, and we're sitting in a department store, and they're like, where is this guy? You're so obsessed with him, blah, blah, blah. And I tell them the story of the ticket and the offer to move home to Atlanta with him, and my girlfriends are going, are you crazy? You're not established here, you're still young, if he's so great, go with him. So I called him, people will remember, I paged him, and he turns around and he calls me, and I said, you know what, I changed my mind, I'll come to Atlanta with you. And he's like, really? I said, where are you? And he was like 75 miles away or something like that. He was, kind of on his track. He turned around and came back. And we loaded up my car, and I moved to Atlanta with him. I do not advise this, of doing that after you know somebody for 2 weeks. I don't care how much you think you've connected with them. Just, don't do it, because this is what happens. We were together 2 years, and since we weren't friends, since we weren't grounded in Christ, there was just, didn't know each other. I'm in a new place. There were so many variables, but mostly, and we know it now, it's because that we let a worldly relationship come into that budding love. Mm-hmm. That physicalness got mm-hmm. too soon. Everything was like too soon. Mm-hmm. You may think, this is it, love at first sight. You don't need to treat love so conveniently and so lightly. It's cultivated, a deep-rooted, kind of love. But anyway, it didn't work out. I think we were together like 2 years, and I just, he did something stupid. And his mother had just passed away too, so he had some things too at a young age. We were in our 20s, so his mother left. We broke up, and we didn't see each other for a long time. And, in this particular case, he wasn't abusive. He was a good guy. We just didn't have that relationship, and it wasn't a sanctified relationship either. So after that, I was just like, I'm not doing this again. I don't have to have a man. I'll just start my own business. I'll be my, and I went through missionary dating for the next 30 years, 30 some odd years. I would date somebody outside the church and try to drag them to church, which was, I call it missionary dating. You're not going to do that. That's not the point in which these men that do not believe in Christ are going to date you.
You were going to save him by getting him to church.
Yeah, I guess I was Jesus' sister. I don't know what I thought I was. It was the most ridiculous thing, I'd be, at a party, one that I probably shouldn't have gone to, because I'd stand out like a sore thumb because I wasn't like them, but I was there with them. You have to remember, because they're going to try to corrupt you. Mm-hmm. If you think, well, Jesus is with me, I'm fine, I'm all good.
The perfect verse for that is evil company corrupts good habits.
For 33 years, and of course Facebook has come about, and I always, in the back of my mind, I was like, I wonder what happened to Keith Sharp. hope he's happy, because I still had that place in my heart, because that was, it was one of those sweet fruits, of your life, even though it, ended badly. But anyway, so I was sitting on Facebook, like we all did for a while, and this comes across my feed, apparently, a person, and his father had died. And I'd known his father and his grandmother through a relationship. Anyway, I sent out a condolence, and then I guess that was almost 2 years later, I get a message from Keith Sharp, and I'm like, my gosh, I mean, when you get a message from somebody 33 years later, it's kind of a little spooky and a little. I'd gotten a divorce, of course. I think his son had gone off to college. Aside from the circumstances, he called me. We talked on the phone. We started really having deeper conversations than you do at 20 years old. Although we talked at 20 and had long conversations. Now we're 50 years later, we're in our 60s. Conversations change. You could still hear that old Keith Sharp. When he did get a chance to come to Memphis, we met up. A little known to him, though, 6 years before, I had gotten out of another narcissistic, kind of abusive relationship. I had nothing left. Because every time you decide to get intimate with somebody, you break off a little piece of yourself and you give it to that person. And I had nothing else to give. I was just like, I broke myself down. I had broken down so much that I just, there was no place else for me to turn except to God. Or either contemplating ending this torturous path I'd taken. And it's something you take, like you may say, well, I was pushed down. No, after it happened so many times, it proves either you're crazy or just way too stubborn if you keep hurting yourself. I had I'd talked to God, and God said, just give me your heart. Just give me this part of your life. Just give me your sexual, this part that you think is so great. Everybody says, oh, this is wonderful being a sexual independent woman, Give me this part of your life, which stems from the women's movement. We get our freedom from this. You're going to be like a man, but we're not. I put on this ring. I still wear it to this day. I will wait for thee, beloved. God said, look, just turn your body, turn yourself into me, and I will heal you. I can't remember where I got the ring, but I know I bought several of them, and I've given out several of these. I put it on my finger, and I said, okay, I will save myself for marriage or heaven, because that no longer is going to be a part of my life. And that's when the healing started. And it didn't happen overnight. It's not like one of those movies. It's like, bam, all of a sudden, it's a long, sometimes it feels like a really long walk. Get very lonely because you've been used to going toward that short-sighted comfort for being alone. You go for that short-sighted attention that you crave, the connection, the intimacy. So you can't go there anymore. And sometimes you might slip a little bit, but not. Grab back on to Jesus' hand on it. Another is my go-to, Jesus take the wheel, because I'm either going to run over somebody or I'm going to make a mistake.
It's interesting because yesterday we stopped in Monroe, Georgia before coming to Alpharetta, and the young lady that I interviewed had a very different situation than what you've talked about, but there's something similar about your two stories. And she talked about the fact that she had to give her brokenness to God, and she had to let that part die so that he could resurrect the new part of her he was wanting to bring out.
Oh, yeah.
And as I'm hearing you talk about that, I think sometimes, especially now, again, it just kind of goes back to our whole culture and what we've been taught about sex, to be blunt.
Yeah,
and
you're an animal.
Right, yeah, this is physical,
urge.
But no, it is very intimate, and God created sex to be intimate. When you're having sex with someone outside the confines of marriage and without God's, I guess, blessing, I don't know if I'm using the right word there, but yeah, you're giving over a piece of your heart.
You're breaking off and just handing yourself off to people that may not, they don't value
They
it.
may not, you're right.
And God didn't say, oh, I'm not, I don't want you to have fun.
Right,
I don't want you to feel this. It was a protection for you, which I realize that now, just like in Leviticus, which, the Jewish, like eating kosher. And this was at that time. They didn't have refrigeration. God wanted them to separate the meat from the dairy. God didn't want them to get sick.
To protect
it's not
them.
that He didn't want them to have cheeseburgers. Instead, He didn't want them to get sick. And then that's a surface thing. And when you take it back over to like sex and intimacy, and you're trading DNA at that point when you're I have read in a scientific study, since it is soft membrane and since it is sperm, your body absorbs that. They say that every person that you've had sex with, that you carry their DNA with you for the rest of your life.
Whoa, I've never thought about that.
Because of the circumstances in which intercourse happens. If you have been on that road of seeking love through sexual gratification, then you can't get rid of that intimacy. It's going to stay with you.
You're bringing to mind again another verse, and I don't have this memorized, and I'm going to try to look it up real quick while we're still talking, but it has to do with making like a covenant with someone when you have sexual intercourse with them. It's amazing how science always backs up the Bible.
Yes.
I was just hearing you saying about the DNA is what I was just thinking about with that verse. I've heard pastors talk about it before, that you've got to break off that agreement that you made when you had sexual intercourse with that person outside of marriage. I mean, so it's that profound in the Bible and what God teaches us about it.
Well, I think also human behavior, if it's just sex, then if somebody cheats on you, why do you take it so personally?
Yeah, why would you get upset about that?
Yeah, why get upset?
Yeah.
There's songs written about being betrayed. If it's no big deal, why are you so upset? There's books been written about it. There's so much time that's been spent on this. Get back to the mere fact that there is a covenant between a man and woman once you have that intimacy. But so I put on this ring. I'm going to try to get to it. Unbeknownst to Keith, my husband, I put on this ring, I will wait for the beloved. And so when he called and we first met up, okay, now we bring it up to, he had just gotten a divorce. He's lost his father. He's wanting to reach out. He did. He came on to me and I went, no, I don't think we're going to do that. I wouldn't even let him kiss me. And he was just like, what? But we've already been together. What is the big deal? And I'm like, well, it just is. You're coming out of something. I can tell you need a friend. We'll be friends, but we're not anything else. That's it. We talked for, I think it was almost a year, just talking on the phone, having these conversations, and the deep conversations for like hours. In fact, my girlfriends were going, well, where were you last night? Oh, well, I was on the phone with Keith. My gosh, y'all talk that long night before, like, what do y'all talk about? But we were just there. But
y'all were building a relationship.
My husband will tell you this. We did this time what we didn't do last time. We became friends and had to respect each other, because as much as you think like it's we were like fire the first time we met. I think, that doesn't establish though respect. And if you don't know a person, the shelf of respect falls very easily if you don't really deeply love that person. Also flawed. We're going to do things, know that person. So we talked and talked and talked. And then I remember, which a lot of girls, which I do have to say this, ladies, You think that if you are celibate and not there's a difference between refrain and celibate. But if you're celibate and you put on this ring, I will wait for my beloved, that nobody will ask you out. I was dating 3 people. I'm not bragging because it had to be God. It couldn't be me. It was just, or maybe it was Satan sending these men to circle me to like tempt me and do this. Maybe I was just too stupid and charming men. Because these same guys would say, well, you know, if you don't have sex anymore till you get married, you may never get married. And I said, I guess I'll just die this way or take care of my mom, which that totally baffled them. They were like, well, what do you mean die this way? It was Thanksgiving, and Keith and I had been talking for a while. Keith said, would you just date me? And I said, well, you know, that doesn't mean that intimacy will, when he said, but if I'm going to do this long distance with you, because I was in Memphis, he was in Atlanta, he said, I want us to be exclusive. And I was like, oh, well, that didn't sound fun. Because I was coming.
You were having fun.
I was enjoying myself. And women were like, how can you date that many? I said, I wasn't sleeping with them. Just dating. Yeah. I was having conversations and dinner and doing activities and going to church. And it was like, it's easy. It's fun. I will never forget the look on his face when he goes, well, are you dating anyone? And I said, well, yeah. We became exclusive. We continued to have conversations, and I visited him, and he came to Memphis. It was a little bit, and he'll tell you, at first it was a little bit of a struggle, because still in his, it was like, that's what, you know, the guy, that's what she said. But once we got that established, and once we got that out of the way, and that was not one of those power struggles, then everything really started just flourishing in our spiritual life and everything else. He ended up proposing to me a year to the day that I let him kiss me. He was like, didn't you expect this? You know, I took you back to the same restaurant we went to and the same place you let me kiss you. And I said, no, I didn't think that you would be that nerdy or that goofy to do something like that. We still waited till marriage, and I was amazed at how nervous I was and excited, and how, because, you know, you think, oh, well, you know, I've been down this road. It won't be special anymore. God will blow you away with the healing that he does not only to your body, but to your heart, on being able to achieve that intimacy that I literally had a do-over. Been married a little over 2 years. He's a kind man in which he established some things, and I didn't even realize going into marriage what I had still carried with me, that men were cruel and men were always looking to be, you know, in charge, or I didn't realize that there was still residual fallout on that cruelty of men. I realize now how I saw men as cruel and overbearing and toxic, which kind of sounds like the way they're trying to portray them now. And I know, I cry. I'm like, they don't know what real men are. They're looking at the damaged ones. And he teaches me every day how much the depth and kindness and heart and loyalty and love that a man can have for his wife, and honor and respect. It never ceases to amaze me how much I'm discovering about myself or him, and how much love that God has for us, because he and I both know that God's hand was on this and bringing us back together after 33 years when we messed it up so bad the first time. A lot of people say that's like, don't you hate the fact you lost those 33 years? If we spend our time thinking about what we lost, we wouldn't be enjoying what we have now. That I have a man I can pray together, that takes the lead and goes to church, and he goes to Bible class with me, and we plant flowers together, or we just have conversations that mean nothing and things that mean so deeply. It's just an amazing partnership. Gosh, I wish other people, you know, people go, oh, that's because it's 33 years. No, that's because it's rooted in Christ. It's rooted in respect for myself and in healing from my heart. a lot of people could say it's letting go. It's letting go of ego to let God heal you. It's not letting go of the hurt. Someone telling another individual, I know how you feel, is the most disrespectful thing I think you can say to someone, because I don't know how you feel, what you've been through, and you're trying to take power away from that person. What I am saying is letting go your ego to God and giving up to God. Those things will just dissipate like smoke, and but you will keep that pain, so we can talk about things like this today,
right?
So we can help people
that
can't see around that bend, that are thinking about, I'm going to empower myself with having sexual energy, and I'm going to lead with that. Them down the road, you are so much going to regret that, because you're special. You're not above the mental and physical confines of earth and this human experience. You need to really talk to somebody who looks around the corner, which brings us back to women mentoring younger women and intervening before media, before Cardi B gets a hold of them. I know that girl, she got to be damaged.
I know.
I mean, when she makes songs off of drugging men and stealing from them and thinks that that's all that, and people follow her songs.
I know.
But the point of it is, we need to, as older women, and need to go and extend ourselves to, and we, I don't know how we market this to younger women, because unless they're seekers, unless the younger, and I think that there are seekers out there and younger women. Yeah, we can't hog tie them and drag them into the women's circle.
I think God will bring people into our path too, people that we can mentor, and I think about that happening in my own life. Had a wonderful relationship with my mother. I still have a great relationship with my mother, but there were some women who reached out to me early on in, I was late 20s, early 30s, but I was really starting to catapult in my relationship with Christ, and they could see that in me. And sometimes I would get just the sweetest little notes, just encouraging me in my walk.
I think that's what we have to remember. We have to quit being the first ones to reprimand, to recognize, like these ladies did for you. That was great.
And I've kept those notes. And to this day, if I'm having a bad day, I'll go back and I'll look at those notes, because they still encourage me.
Oh, write me some notes.
I love to write notes. Yeah, but I think, again, it just goes back to some of those old school things we've been taught, that we were talking about with civility. Mm-hmm. And you think about how back in the old days, we couldn't communicate with phones. They didn't exist. And so what would
didn't have our attention.
Right. And so people would sit down, they would thoughtfully think out what they needed to write to someone else to encourage them. And that's just one example. These ladies also they literally took me under their wings. When I was getting involved in a committee at church or something to work on the women's committee or whatever it was, there was always a woman there to help me, to send me a scripture, to guide me. And it just makes a huge impact in a young woman's life. And you think about the book of Titus, and that's what that book tells us to do.
As encouragement, this ring, I will wait for thee, beloved. I've carried these rings in my purse, and I've met quite a few crying girls in the bathroom, or just in conversation. So I've given these out, and if anybody wants to contact, I will send them. I will wait for the beloved ring, because
I love that.
I could not. My husband just bought me a wedding band because I did not want to take this one off. And I said, this is how you and I got here, because I waited for you. And I think if anything that I would want to be part of my ministry would be, I will wait for the beloved.
There's a scripture that means a lot to me too, that says God acts on behalf of those who wait for him. If you're out there and you're looking for that person that you want to marry, let God bring that person to you.
Yeah, don't go out and do missionary dating. It's really a dead-end project. Literally, folks, and girls and men too. We have to realize
that's right.
Our young men,
yes,
they've been pressured to be playas and to all these things that now I know that, you know, the tender heart that lies within a man's breast. It's too much secular dealing with our sexuality.
Yes.
I think the church needs to talk more about it.
I agree.
I think parents need to talk more about it, not in the sense of the mechanics,
Right.
but in the sense of the spirit and what it does to you later on.
I agree with that. And you have been so incredibly transparent today and so open. I do want to encourage people, if they want to reach out to you, they can contact me at Angie@revealedpodcast.org. I will be happy to get you in touch with Tess.
Yes, because we can talk on the phone. I don't have to find you in the bathroom crying.
That's right.
I don't have to, you tear up, over a broken heart on something. Let's just have a conversation. Let me share this ring with you.
Yeah.
And just pray and consider this, that you will wait for my beloved.
That's such a good place to end. And thank you so much for sharing today.
It's been a pleasure. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you.